It's time for Brush Street Beat, presented by our friends at McLaren Health Care. Today's guest is a returning guest of the Word on Woodward, Jason Beck, MLB.com Tigers writer. Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to join us again today.
Thank you for having me on. Great to be back here in the middle of winter as we look forward to some warm weather and hopefully some baseball here pretty soon.
Yeah, we're getting close to some Tigers baseball. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about today was the addition of Wilson Ramos, a catcher that the Tigers signed to a 1 year, $2 million deal. He addressed the media yesterday and he was very, I learned a lot from him. Let's put it that way. He was very talkative, telling us a lot about himself and especially his relationship with Miguel Cabrera and how that was a huge factor in him signing here in Detroit, Jason.
Yeah, he's they've actually worked together for a little bit. They've worked together basically all off season, basically since the end of the World Series. So it's they've had a chance to really check on each other's progress. Now that being said, Ramos said he and Miggy never talked about the Tigers catcher's opening, even though it was clearly a huge void in the lineup for the whole offseason. We've all been waiting for them to fill it with somebody here for basically since the season ended. So it's the pieces were in place for this to happen. It's just amazing how it happened without that much influence. But it's pretty encouraging. I mean, Miggy has had different workout buddies over the years. JD Martinez and he worked out for a while. I think Alex Avila and Miggy worked out for a few years. So it's this is not the first time Miguel Cabrera has had a workout partner who has ended up becoming a teammate. But I think at this stage, it's pretty big, and hopefully it helps him, ease the transition because he has spent like 10 of his 11 major league seasons in the National League East. The only time he's been in the AL Central was when he made his major league debut for Minnesota, like 11 or 12 years ago.
What do you think of this? Is this an upgrade at the catching position? We were so high on Romine last year, and now he handled the pitching staff. But when I look at this, I can't help but like this move a lot.
I think offensively, he has a chance to be a pretty good upgrade. If the Tigers get the Wilson Ramos we saw in 2019, and really most of the years before that, this should be a pretty good offensive upgrade. And you could end up being the best hitting Tigers catcher that the Tigers have had since Alex Avila, probably. He had a down year offensively last year. I think part of that was in relation to making the transition to getting the ball in the air and trying to drive the ball. And I think there were some growing pains doing that, especially pretty abruptly with an interrupted season. He said he didn't really have the regular at-bats he felt like he needed to make that transition work. So I would expect he's going to get plenty of opportunities, certainly early on in the season, to see if he can make that work, unless Jake Rogers just comes into spring training and hits like gangbusters and ends up getting a timeshare at the catcher's position. But there's ample opportunity for Ramos to show what he still has offensively, whether or not he hits for power. If he just has a line drive approach and sprays line drives to right center all spring and into the summer, that can work too. And he said that guys he was working out with were joking about him after the deal came out, news of the deal came out, that this is your chance to finally get some triples. And he says, I'll sort up for some RBI doubles too. So, but offensively, it should be an upgrade. Defensively, it remains to be seen. He's had some troubles getting the low strike called on the pitch framing aspect, but he has worked on that. We'll see. It'll be an interesting challenge because he has some guys who have the chance to get some low strikes called and who could really benefit from that. But, we'll see how that goes.
One other thing that he mentioned that really stuck out to me, Jason, was the fact of losing as much weight as he did this offseason. You mentioned he was working out with Miguel Cabrera, but he said he went from 270, 275 to about 240, 245. So somewhere in the 30-pound range. That has to be really something that can benefit, especially a catcher.
Yeah, that surprised me. And I'm always hesitant to, after, in recent years to make too much of the proverbial best shape of my life story going into spring training. But I would think for a catcher entering his mid-30s, that is significant. It's something we heard about Ivan Rodriguez going through at a certain stage of his career, basically out of necessity, because at some point those knees take so much wear and tear. Most catchers need to take that weight off. I think even Gerald Laird talked about it at some point during his career. Said you cannot carry that same weight after a certain point in your career that you did younger, because your knees just don't have the strength to do that anymore, right? Or the durability. So it's we'll see how it works. It's a little bit of an adjustment now, because especially if you're talking about a 162 game season, catchers do tend to lose weight as the season goes on. So will he still have that energy with that lower weight that he did in years past? Well, we'll see, especially if he wants to catch as much as he's talking about, being basically an everyday catcher. It's going to be a test for him to maintain that. But right now, at least it sounds like a pretty good building block.
Jason, last week the Tigers had their winter caravan, but it was all virtual. And when I could get on the Zoom calls, I definitely did get on them. But sometimes it conflicted with what we were doing Red Wing wise. I have 4 very quick observations, and I'm going to throw them at you. And then I want you to answer quickly, because Daniella has some probing questions that she wants to ask you. Mainly, why don't you have your beard going right now? It's the middle of February. But aside from that, and you can answer that when Daniella asks you. My first observation, Torkelson pretty much thinks he's going to play third for the Tigers. I mean, he has taken no reps at first at all.
Yeah, and I'm hesitant to make too much of that, because when you've played first base as much as Torque did in college, look, it's not going to be a big transition if he has to move back there at some point. Whether it's a necessity due to injuries, or if they decide that they just don't think his defense is going to cut it at third. It's like riding a bicycle. I don't think it would be a big transition there. The fact that they haven't had him do any work there yet, yeah, it's notable, but I don't want to make too much of it yet.
All right. Second, Casey Arthur Mize, the player that's near and dear to my heart, does not lack confidence.
He does not. He looked at last year's struggles as a learning opportunity, but he also didn't want to brush off last year as like a transition year for him. You definitely got the sense talking to him last week that there's some competitiveness there, and he wants to come back and show that that he learned something from it, and that he's a better pitcher than that.
And Spencer Turnbull, he's going to try to amp it down a little bit on the mound, but he's still going to be a fiery competitor.
Yeah, I'll kind of believe it when I see it, when he talks about amping it down. I think he thrives so much on that energy. Sometimes that's hard to channel, and sometimes you need a catcher who can help you channel that by getting you to focus. But I also think new pitching coach Chris Fetter could have an influence on that.
And finally, my last observation, Boyd and Norris are attached at the hip.
Oh yeah, that's they go back to Lansing in the Midwest League. They're in the Blue Jay system when they were both drafted by the Blue Jays. They've been telling stories about that for years. That they shared a house that summer after Boyd was drafted. They invited him in, and Daniel Norris was staying in the attic. What Daniel didn't talk about, what we was that sometimes Daniel was so polite that when he would leave that house, he would sneak out through one of the windows because he didn't want to wake everybody up or disturb anybody by going down through the steps and everything. So he would sneak out, which sounds crazy, but when you know Daniel, it sounds completely like what a Daniel Norris thing to do.
Can you imagine the rest of the house waking up thinking that Norris is upstairs sleeping, but he's gone because he went through the window? And so they're all like on pins and needles. Man, that guy's sleeping late. You know what I mean? I mean, maybe he should just announce, hey, I'm leaving. Boom, slam the door. They'll like stir. Oh, yeah, Norris is leaving. And then go back to bed.
It sounds like something like he would sneak off to a coffee house late at night to go like listen to like a poetry slam or something along those lines.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I could definitely
Yeah,
see
yeah,
that.
something like that. I have envisioned Norris doing that over the years.
One last question for you, Jason. Since we were talking about Daniel Norris and he did address the media during the Tigers virtual media week, where do you see him fitting into the Tigers lineup? Is he going to be in the starting rotation or is he going to take on more of a reliever role like he did last season?
I suspect he's going to push like crazy to try to win a rotation spot unless they sign somebody else. I think he's serious about pushing in there. I think he wants to be a starter. I think he wants to make his brand as a starter. I think he wants to contribute in that sense. And I think the fact that he's getting into pitch design now is a potentially big sign in his development to get beyond the fastball changeup mix and try to mix in some of these other pitches. I think I'm going to be very curious in Lakeland to see what type of impact Chris Fetter has on him, because I do think that Norris is an eager student on this, which is interesting for somebody who has never done this. And he admitted on the Zoom call with us, he's never been a big metrics guy. He's never been a big pitch design guy, which is crazy when you look at some of the spin rates he has had on his pitches. His fastball works at a reduced velocity because of the spin rate. And, it's especially now going into his last year before potential free agency. If he has a big year, he would have no shortage of interest on the open market, in part because of those spin rates. And if he adds another pitch to go with it, if he dusts off the curveball and gets that working as an effective pitch again, if he does something with the slider, if he does something with a two-seamer, I think that, he could be a four-pitch starter without much trouble. And, if he wins that spot, then he certainly should have a clean slate with AJ Hinch and Chris Fetter, that it could be very big for him going forward, whether it's in Detroit or somewhere else. So I'm going to be very curious about this. Now, it could come at like Mize or Scooble's expense, at least starting out the year, but it could be an interesting bridge if the Tigers want to use it to help regulate the innings that Scooble and Mize pick up, early in the year. And then maybe they ease those guys in the rotation spots and you either put him in the bullpen or Biggie back him.
One of the many storylines to follow as we head into spring training, Jason, which is just 2 weeks away now, a little more than 2 weeks away. So we'll definitely stay in contact with you because will you be in Florida?
I'm hoping to be. I haven't set my plans yet, but we're optimistic on getting down there at some point. And with the weather forecasted for this weekend and then the next week, that warm weather can't get here soon enough.
Yeah, I bet. Well, we'll definitely stay in contact with you either way. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, Jason.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And a big thank you to McLaren Health Care for presenting Brush Street Beat right here on the Word on Woodward.